Conspiracy Beers coming at you with another rant here. We're going to talk about extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence versus Occam's razor. We're going to take a look at the heliocentric model and the geocentric model, or the globe Earth model versus flat Earth model. We're going to break those two things down, and we're going to ask ourselves which one requires the most evidence, which one's more extraordinary, and which one seems to support Occam's razor. Which one, in other words, Occam's razor is, you take a couple of explanations, whichever one has the least assumptions. In other words, the simplest concept is generally the best explanation. And we're going to compare those two things, those two models, and we're going to decide which one requires the most evidence, the most extraordinary evidence, and which one seems to fit Occam's razor. Because this is wild to me. This is another one of those wild things that, like, when people say that flat Earth requires extraordinary evidence, and the only reason that they say that is because they've been taught one thing for their whole life. Ever since they were in grade school, they were taught this globe Earth model and how everything makes sense, because a model was created based on a lot of assumptions, and they came up with good answers to pretty much all of our everyday life. And because of that, because they came up with this model and they came up with some good ideas to support it, even though it's all based on assumptions, to us it makes sense. And anything outside of that sounds absolutely ridiculous. But I think I'm able to change your mind today, because I'm going to show you just how extraordinary the heliocentric model is. Because maybe you don't know. Maybe you're brand new to the flat Earth idea, and maybe you've never really learned the heliocentric model. And one thing that I learned several years back when I was doing deep research into other religions, comparing one religion to the other, I quickly learned that in order to convince somebody out of a religion, to show them that their religion was false, I had to first show them how crazy their religion was. In other words, I had to convince them of their own religion. I had to show them their own religion to talk them out of it, because they'd never done enough research. They never asked the right questions. They didn't know their own religion. So that's what I want to do today. I want to break down the heliocentric model and compare it to the flat Earth model, and let you decide which one requires the most evidence and which one seems to fit Occam's razor. Okay? So let's break it down. We're going to start with the globe Earth model, or the heliocentric model. Okay, you live on a ball that is 25,000 miles in circumference. It's tilted 23.4 degrees. It spins on its own axis 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. And you might say to yourself, yeah, it only spins once a day, so don't make such a big deal about it spinning 1,000 miles an hour. And here's what I'm going to say. Rim velocity is rim velocity. 1,000 miles an hour is 1,000 miles an hour. It's fast no matter how you look at it, right? It's fast. It's unfathomable fast. Okay? But we're just getting warmed up, okay? Because not only are we spinning 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, tilted, we're also doing, this is my sun, my flat Earth model right here is my sun. We're doing 1,000 miles an hour. We're doing an elliptical orbit. Elliptical. Keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that. Elliptical orbit around the sun at 66,600 miles an hour. Unfathomable speed. How much more faster is that than a speeding bullet? Have you ever watched a missile launch and saw how quick it went and how fast? You can barely see it. How about a speeding bullet? You ever watched a video of somebody shooting a bullet in real time? It's almost impossible to see it. It's so fast. But now think about that times, 25 times? I'm just throwing a number out there. It's probably even more than that. I don't know. But 66,600 miles an hour is absolutely ridiculous. But keep this in mind. Coming back to the elliptical orbit. Okay? What does that mean, elliptical orbit? Have you ever been in a race car doing 200 miles an hour on an elliptical racetrack? You might say that if you continue to do 200 miles an hour straight, you might not necessarily feel, after a while, you might not feel that speed. But the instant you take a turn at 200 miles an hour, I'm here to tell you, you're going to feel every bit of that and then some. And this question was actually proposed to one of the leading astrophysicists in the world, and it stumped her because she had never thought about it. The name of it, it's a Wakey Wakey. If you look for Wakey Wakey, WAYKI, same way. So it's Wakey Wakey on YouTube. I might have to drop the video underneath here, but he actually interviewed this astrophysicist and proposed that question to her, and it stumped her because she had never thought about that. Because it's common sense that if you're doing an elliptical orbit, you're going to accelerate, right? Coming around a turn, you're going to feel that. To say that you're not and just say, oh, but what about Albert Einstein's special law of relativity? Everything's just it's not going to matter. Guys, we're not even halfway through this, and it's already getting absolutely ridiculous. And if you tell me that you're not going to feel any of this, you're living in a fantasy, my friend. So, elliptical orbit, not only are we doing that, we're also moving with the sun at over 500,000 miles an hour. 500,000 miles an hour. We're now getting into numbers that like it's absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane to think that we're ripping through the universe with the sun at 500,000 miles an hour, and we're not even done yet. We are also traveling sideways with the Milky Way galaxy through the Great Retractor at 1.2 million miles an hour. 1.2 million. Do I even need to go any further, or is this already sounding absolutely ridiculous? And you might say, well, none of this is true. You're just making all this up. I encourage you, don't trust anything I say. Look into this yourself, right? Because even if you Google, like, how far does the Earth travel each day in the universe, Google's going to tell you over 1 million miles. So we're traveling over 1 million miles a day, spinning, wobbling, tilting, hurling, slingshotting ourselves around the sun at unfathomable speeds. And yet, every single day, we see the same stars at night, no parallax, to a point where they are so precise that we can calculate eclipses. We know when things are going to happen with the stars above our heads. It's like a clock. It's geared. Guys, the sky clock was created by the Almighty. It's a time clock above us that is cyclical. We can freaking set our watches to it. But yet we're doing all these movements, and the North Star, Polaris star, is stationary at all times. It might wobble just a little bit back and forth if you were to take a time lapse of it, right? But it's always there. If you go to the Georgia Guidestones, there's a little peephole in the Georgia Guidestones, and you can set a camera looking at Polaris there every day, all night, 365 times a year. If you do a time-lapse video of the stars, you can literally see them doing a circle around Polaris, just like you can anywhere else. Every day, 365 times a year. We can literally set our watches to the sky clock above our heads. But yet we're doing all of this traveling through the infinite vacuum. We're a gaseous space ball going through a vacuum of nothingness. Think about that. Without a barrier, supposedly. Without a barrier. I want you to ponder just on that craziness. That's insane to really believe that. So you tell me, after I've said just that, and there's so much more. There's so much more that we can get into, but just based off of what I just said, does that require extraordinary evidence? Is that an extraordinary claim that requires extraordinary evidence? I would most definitely say for myself, absolutely, positively, yes. And you will never be able to convince me to go back to believing that fantasy after knowing what I know now, right? So we covered the globe Earth and all its craziness. Now we're going to look at the flat Earth and geocentrism. As you can tell, I'm passionate about it. I'm getting fired up, right? Because this is just simple to me. It really is this simple. Everything, our God-given senses tell us that it's flat and stationary. Government documents, I've said this before, government documents, every branch of the military tells us that it's flat and stationary. The Bible, government documents, our God-given senses, all these things tell us it's flat and stationary. Think about this. You are on a boat in the middle of a lake. It's a calm, beautiful, sunshiny day, no clouds in the sky, peaceful. You're sitting in the boat, the water is as flat as it can be, and you can see the reflection of the sun beaming towards you, reflecting itself off of that still, flat water. And you're going to sit here and tell me that the earth is spinning 1,000 miles an hour, going around the sun at 66,000 miles an hour, traveling with the sun through the universe at over 500,000 miles an hour, traveling with the Milky Way galaxy at 1.2 million miles an hour, ripping, wobbling, tilting, unfathomable speeds. And you're going to tell me that this place is not flat and stationary? That instead it's doing all these things? I got something to tell you, man. I mean, I got some oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you, because that makes absolutely no sense. Think about this. Here's something else to think about. Earthquakes. Have you ever watched videos of earthquakes happening and people videotaping their swimming pool as an earthquake happens, and what that actually does to the water? It literally starts to ripple the water and rip the water out of the pool. Just that slightest tremor, that slightest movement in the earth, in a certain location of the earth, causes that much to happen with the water. And yet we're doing all these crazy things in the universe, and we don't feel any of that. It's just as flat and stationary as it seems, folks. So now that I've kind of gone through this, what makes more sense to you? Which model requires more evidence, more extraordinary evidence? And which model fits into Occam's razor the best? You tell me. Now I'm going to leave you with this. Listen, God created this place. He told us what he did in the Bible. Our God-given senses tell us that we are stationary. The ground that we walk on doesn't move. The earth is flat. It's as simple as that. And I encourage you to stop listening to these priests, as I like to call them. Stop taking their word for it. Start using your God-given senses. You know what's funny is that people say that everybody will agree with this statement. People say that the government lies. I don't think anybody would argue that statement. But when it comes to space and where we live, all of a sudden the government is just not going to lie about that. They're going to tell us the truth. They're going to be honest with us about at least that. And I just encourage you to think. Use your God-given senses. Use your rationality. Use your cognitive ability. And just start thinking for yourself. Stop saying that somebody else has figured that stuff out. Somebody smarter than me has figured that out. It's just too complicated for me. And start saying to yourself, you know what? Maybe I should just start using my own senses and doing my own research and coming to my own conclusions. That's the only thing I'm asking you to do. Don't trust anything that I say. All I'm saying is to think for yourself. Because when you do, and you start to ask the right questions, you find out that everything you've been taught is a lie. And then you can be completely free, because the truth makes us free. With that, this is the Conspiracy Beer, signing out until the next one. Take care. God bless. Peace.